Friends, would you take a breath with me as we breathe in the work of forgiveness? We talk about restoration and reconciliation. And I tell you a story of when I had trouble breathing when I was in high school, running the mile for time for my athletics teams. I grew up in West Texas. We were expected to run a mile in a certain amount of time. I am not a good runner. I had the wonderful genetic lottery win of being both not very fast over short distances and not able to run a long time in one sitting. So I did not like running the mile, but we had to run it every Friday. That was our Friday ritual. It's part of our preseason work for both football and basketball, and you had to make it in a certain amount of time depending on what level you wanted to play at. And I knew there was no chance I was ever going to make the mile on my first time. I was always envious of the people who could do that. But I had to run it in less than 5 minutes and 15 seconds. I can still remember this. And the very first time I ran it my senior year, I thought I was well prepared, and I ran it in 5 minutes and 18 seconds. And I thought, okay, it's okay, I'll get it next time. But I did not get it the next time. And I did not get it the next week after that. And I did not get it the next week after that. And I got into this rut. I thought, I cannot do this. I was very involved, and so I was also on the drum line in high school. And we also had practice on Fridays. And one week, we were somewhere else practicing. We had to get on a bus and come back, and then I had to go run the mile for time. We got back late, so I did not have time to change into my running shoes and my athletic gear. So I was wearing a black polo shirt, cargo shorts, and my black band shoes. If you were in marching band, you know what the band shoes are. They have a rolled heel so that you can march more easily. They're not very fashionable, and they're not running shoes. And as I got off the bus and started booking it towards my high school, I see my teammates running the other way towards where we run the mile. I forgot to tell you this part. We're in West Texas. It's 100 degrees outside, and you have to run 3/4 of a mile to get to the field where then you run the mile for time. So I take off because there were strict penalties for missing practice. And I got in with my teammates, and we're jogging, and I'm wearing my band casual uniform. And we get to the field for the mile, and the people who have already run the mile for time, they don't have to do anything. So one of my friends says, McKinley, you can borrow my shoes. I said, oh, that'd be great. What size are they? He said, 10. I wear a size 13. It's the best I can do because I can't run in my band shoes. And another son says, hey, you can borrow my shorts. Just take your top off and you can wear my basketball shorts. I said, great, because I can't run in cargo shorts. I said, what size are those shorts? He said, well, they're really big on me. And I said, okay. The drawstring was broken. So I had to put the drawstring into a loop and flip it over my head. So I had a string holding up my shorts, running in shoes that were too small. And I would love to tell you, friends, that even without all the things that I thought I needed, that I got what I wanted. I would love to tell you that I ran the mile in 5 minutes and 15 seconds. I did not. It was close, I guess, but it was not that close. But it became this legendary story, and I think back on all the times that I have wanted or needed something that I've had to do all this pre-work for, because you couldn't just show up and run the mile. Some people could, let me rephrase. Some people could show up and just run the mile and get it in one shot. I could not do that. I had to practice for weeks before just to try and do it. I had to do a lot of pre-work. And it was really helpful for me to have everything I needed. My running shoes, my shorts, not coming from somewhere else. But we don't always have those things, right? So what does that have to do with forgiveness in Yom Kippur? I think about that because of all the pre-work that was necessary. I couldn't just show up and immediately get what I wanted or what I needed. Sometimes, when we mess up, when we are seeking forgiveness or reconciliation, wouldn't it be nice to just show up and receive that? But that's not how it works. At least not in a way that actually feels like it is wholeness making, like it is healing. Sometimes we say sorry for things that we're not really sorry for, right? Especially if you're from the Midwest and you accidentally get into someone's path when you're walking, you say, "Oop, oop, sorry. You're not that sorry. It's just something that we say, right? When we talk about forgiveness, especially at this time of year, often we're thinking about like interpersonal forgiveness. If I mess up and hurt you, I seek forgiveness. And in our Western culture, a lot of white Western culture influenced by Christianity, forgiveness is kind of expected. You almost feel like a bad person if you don't forgive someone for a mistake they made. I've been reading through a book by Rabbi Danya Ruttenberg. It's called On Repentance and Repair. And she writes about the difference between forgiveness and the word that we often hear around this time, repentance, teshuvah, the word that Brenda brought up. That is very Christian sounding, and she likes to use the word reconciliation or restoration instead. There's a difference between forgiveness and restoration, a difference between forgiveness and reconciliation, a difference between forgiveness and teshuvah, this Hebrew word, which means not just repentance. It literally means coming back around, turning around and coming back to where you started. But it's not just turning around a quarter of a mile track 4 times and coming back to where you started. Because when you come back to where you started, the expectation of teshuvah is that your behavior has changed, that your mindset has changed, that your soul has been changed by the work of teshuvah, by the pre-work of teshuvah. If you're expecting reconciliation or restoration or forgiveness, you can't just show up and expect it. There's some pre-work you have to do. Teshuvah, unfortunately, is kind of like running the mile for time for your soul. It's not always comfortable to do repentance work, to do restoration work, to do reconciliation. It's not always easy. It's not always quick. Let's sit with that for a second. Reconciliation, restoration, teshuvah. That is different than forgiveness. And it is work that is not always quick. So you might be asking, well, what is it? What is the difference? Rabbi Ruttenberg talks about forgiveness is something that you get from someone that you have harmed. It is interpersonal, and it is something that is given. It can't be demanded. In some ways, it can't even be expected. It's something that is given. And it does not have to be given, especially in cases of really serious or irreparable harm. Forgiveness is not demanded nor expected. It has to be given. And it is not necessary for us to do teshuvah, for us to do the repentance, the repair, the reconciliation. That stuff happens before any kind of apology or any asking of forgiveness. That stuff is the pre-work. It's the stuff you do before you run the mile for time in somebody else's shoes and in somebody else's shorts. So what do we need to do for teshuvah? Rabbi Ruttenberg has a whole list, a whole framework that she invites people to use in between one another, that she invites people to do with institutions, and she calls on nations to do for harms that they have caused historically. It is part of a reparations framework. But for us individuals, where we start, doing the teshuvah work, the repair work, often has to start inside of us. It's soul work. Sometimes I don't like to be told that I'm wrong. Anybody in here like that? Sometimes I get a little bit defensive when somebody points out something that I've done incorrectly. Just sometimes. Only for the briefest moments. And sometimes what comes out of me in those moments, I was not even aware was inside of me. The flashes of anger and frustration, the shutting down, the disconnecting from people around me, I was not aware that was inside of me. And yet, it was. There's an understanding in psychoanalytic theory, in psychology, something called the exiled parts of ourselves, or disowned parts. Sometimes it's called split-offs, parts work. They're things that have happened to us in our past, oftentimes traumatic events, and we disown parts of ourselves. We become unwhole. And then when someone presses that button that reminds us of that time, something comes out of us that we weren't aware of. Part of the teshuvah work that we are called to is to go inside of ourselves and do the soul work of recognizing, whoa, what is going on with me? Is there a part of me that I have split off in the past from where I was hurt when I was younger? And now it's coming out now in this situation. And doing the work of recapturing those split-offs, of reintegrating those places, of restoring those places. That is also part of repentance work, actually. Part of teshuvah. It is part of the going around and coming back to where you were, back to where you started. Understanding our own traumas, our own personal stuff, what triggers us, that is part of teshuvah work. If we want to do repair work with someone that we have hurt, when something comes out of us that we were not aware, we can't do it if that part of me is still hanging out over here, if I have not helped reintegrate it. You can't. Because you don't have your stuff, all your stuff. You don't have your running shoes. You don't have your shorts. We don't have a chance of coming back to where we are or where we were. That's why it takes work. That is one of the hopes that we might practice this year when we talk about wholeness and reconciliation. It's doing spiritual accounting work like Brenda has offered us. And when we think about our take-home work, who are the people that we have hurt? Who has hurt us? The deeper part of that question is, what parts of me have I split off that I need to recapture and bring back in and struggle with and work with a therapist, with body work, because this lives in your body, as Dr. Bessel van der Kolk talks about. Those things live in your body as well. So it's not just about using your mind to talk through things, which is important. And it's not just about doing the soul work of doing the spiritual accounting, but there's also a physical component of this as well. I would love to talk with you more about the kinds of practices we might engage in. We try and do some of them communally here. Reading through that prayer was one of them. But I want to lift this up. When we talk about Yom Kippur, for those of us who are Jewish and celebrate, when we talk about atonement and reconciliation and restoration, atonement often gets talked about in the Jewish ritual as this service that the high priest does, and it's almost magical. Atonement just happens. But Rabbi Ruttenberg lifts up that this is not automatic atonement. It's not automatic reunification, reintegration of people who have been estranged from one another. It's more like purification. It's more like wiping the slate clean to then do the teshuvah work. It's kind of like, instead of having to run the 3/4 of a mile, you show up, now you're ready. You've got all of your stuff. All you have to do is recapture it, put it on, come back around to who you were and who you are, and begin the work of repair. So friends, if this is you, if you are in need of repair or restoration or wholeness, if there is someone who has harmed you, Remember that you are not required to forgive, nor expected to forgive, especially if it's really serious. But that all of us have some teshuvah work to do to recapture our split-offs, to work with what triggers us, with what is bringing out things that we were not aware, to keep it from doing further harm, to become whole and to work on our own healing so that we do not cause further harm. Not just for the people who are here in this sanctuary and joining us online, but for the next person to walk through those doors who is in need of a safe space, need of a healing space. If we're not doing our own healing work, what do we have to offer? I want to read these words on healing trauma from Rabbi Lawrence Kushner. Go down into yourself with a flashlight, looking for the evil we have intended or done. Not to excise it as if it were some alien growth, but rather to find the holy spark within it. To find those places that make us feel defensive, that make us feel scared. To bring them back in and recognize that it is all part of us, it is all part of our stuff. And may we hold it with love and let it go if it is not serving us. And find our own way to come back around. And however long it takes us, because there's no mile for time for soul work. And may the healing work that we do here this week, next week, and in all the weeks to come be the most welcoming thing about this congregation. May it be so.